let's start the recording. And welcome everyone to the developer meeting from the Keptn community. In this meeting, as always, the core team will present to the rest of the community what they've worked on in the last sprint, so the last 2 weeks. And yeah, with that, I would like to start and hand over to Moritz, which has some nice upgrades of code to us.
Thank you. Now I can share. Perfect. Let's see if this works. There's no window. Doesn't allow me to share.
You cannot share it?
I will try again 1 second. No. Could you please continue sharing for me?
Sure. I will take just chance now to, hi back, Abhijit. Welcome to the community meeting. Okay.
So yeah, the first thing I worked on is the upgrade for all Keptn services to Go 1.17. We're actually specifically on 1.17.5 because this is also the latest version that is fully supported by Dynatrace. And we want every user of Keptn also, of course, to have all the features enabled from Dynatrace. Yeah, so we switched to that version basically in all pipelines for all Go-based services. Yeah. No hiccups with that, actually. It worked out pretty.
Mod files look a little bit different
now. They have all the indirect dependencies in there as well in a separate require block. Yeah. Everything else works as before, basically. Just one thing, please update your local Go versions. If you haven't already, update them to 1.17 as well, please. Otherwise, you will get weirdly generated Go models.
You're muted, Moritz.
I'm muted?
No.
Wait, what?
The last thing we heard is upgrade to Go 1.17 locally, else we will get weird Go mod files, and then you mute it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That was everything important I had to say, anyways. Okay. Yeah. Then the next thing is some fixes for the release pipelines. We had some issues with our automatic release pipelines regarding kind of race conditions. And then right in the next step, it couldn't be found when we wanted to upload artifacts to that release. So we added a sleep command in between that seems to fix that. And then also there was some minor bugs with other shell commands, as you can see here. I removed some quotes, so that and some folder structure.
We had a similar issue with
correctly.
We had a similar issue with draft releases on Keptn Contrib and Keptn Sandbox, and it seems to have auto-resolved. It seems to have been an API issue by GitHub itself. That being said, it could still be that the Keptn bot token that you're using here could positively or negatively affect it. Long story short, the GitHub draft release, if you create it and if you upload assets to it, is very flaky.
Mm-hmm. Is that not the draft release and not the pre-release, right?
Just draft releases. Like anything else worked out of the box, but the draft releases via the GitHub CLI, I need to add that actually. That one was quite flaky. Using whatever you do manually or some other tools worked out of the box, but the GitHub CLI and draft releases, that one was very flaky.
Yeah, we're using exactly that. So maybe that's the issue. Yeah. But with the sleep in between, it seems that the GitHub API was able to catch up or the CLI, I have no idea. But yeah, basically waiting between creating the release and uploading assets to that release. That's that. And then the last change I wanted to present is I made an upgrade to our integration test pipeline here. And actually, Giovanni, if you go to the Actions tab and open the integration test pipeline in the repo,
okay,
not in the PR itself. Yeah. And then if you go to run workflow, I added a checkbox here so that you can decide beforehand if you actually want to have your test names for a few hours after the test run, or if you want to remove them directly. In any case, the support archive is still going to be there and won't be deleted with this checkbox, so you will still have insights into your run if you want it for debugging purposes. Additionally, in this PR, I also lowered the time to live for failed namespaces from failed runs. I lowered that for manual runs from 6 to 3 hours, as per the request of the team. This should be enough for everybody. So yeah. And that's actually it for me. Thanks for sharing the screen, Giovanni. I will fix that for next time.
No worries. Then, Florian, can you share, or do you have similar issue?
Let me try. First of all, can you hear me?
Yep.
I can hear myself again. I will turn down my volume for now, so if you have any questions, please ask them after I've presented everything. All right. Okay, here it is. Yeah, so for this meeting, I would like to talk about two pull requests, both about the shipyard controller, or Shippy. And yeah, basically the first one was a fix regarding the representation of the overall sequence state. So what was the problem here? If we had a sequence that contained multiple stages that are being executed in parallel, and one of those, for example, was stalling. So for example, due to task executor not being able to complete its task after it has sent the started event. But the problem was when another one of those parallel stages was finished, and the completion of that sequence in that stage did not trigger any further sequences, then the whole sequence state was considered to be finished, and that's of course not wrong. So what I've added in this pull request is, first of all, an integration test that checks that scenario, and the logic in the shipyard controller has been adapted to really go through all the stages, all the sequences within those, and really check if all of those are actually finished before setting the overall sequence state to finished. All right. First of all, are there any questions about that? Turn up my volume now. All right, if not, then let's continue with the second one. This was also for Shippy. Here we had some cases where also when we had, for example, a stalling sequence and you wanted to abort it, in some cases, certain entries that are expected in the database, for example, the original sequence triggered event that triggered the sequence, because that's being used to refer to the sequence finished event to afterwards. So if that was not there anymore for whatever reason, then the database was not cleaned up properly, and so we had some edge cases where new sequences in the same stage were still blocked. And this pull request did some changes. So first of all, if the original sequence triggered event is not there anymore, it will still proceed with cleaning up everything it can to really make sure that the stage where the sequence was running in is not blocked anymore. So new sequences can be executed again after canceling this stalling sequence. Any questions about that? All right. If not, I will hand over to Andre.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. So I'll share my screen. Hope it will work. Yeah, probably yes. Good. So yeah, the last sprint on my side was mainly focused on some bug fixing and enhancing or fixing the integration test or the unit tests. First of all, I will start with the bug fixes. Actually, this was kind of bug fixing enhancement or cleanup, where we actually try to unify the response code when the Git upstream is not reachable due to some reasons. For example, until now, when the user added an invalid token, he received an 424 error, and this was actually quite misleading, because when the user had added invalid remote URI or URL, he received 404 errors. So actually we wanted to unify all these responses regarding the configuration of the Git upstream. So it's kind of now unified. This is actually also a breaking change, but it's kind of not that difficult to adapt the changes from the users. Okay, the second fix was when fixing the failing the sequences when the evaluation was aborted or errored. Until now, for example, when triggering an evaluation, if the get SLE provider has received some kind of unexpected error, for example, it was aborted or some connection problems and had a response, some error, or it was aborted, then the sequence hadn't failed until now, because it was checking just for the failed result when the get SLI or the lighthouse has, when the evaluation has normally failed due to quality gates. So now actually the sequence is failing when some kind of any problem appears. So this was actually more of a bug fix. Then, as I already said, fixing and enhancements of the integration tests or the unit test. We had multiple enhancements of the backup restore test, for example, backupping the Git credentials when using the resource service in integration test, as we recently enabled the resource service in our integration test, so this needed to be adapted. And also adding a Git head reset to the integration test, as it is part of their documentation and was not covered in the integration test, as well as some refactoring and enhancement in this test. And a bigger task was enhancing the quality gates tests, so which means triggering the evaluation. In this particular pull request, we increased the coverage of the unit tests. And also enhance the integration tests to have more checks. Added also some integration tests with unexpected behavior. We also found out some bugs which were fixed as part of this pull request. And yeah, it was kind of making the testing and software better testable. Yes, so that's probably it. Are there any questions? Okay, silence, so I assume no. So thanks, and I will hand it over to Bernd.
Thanks. Just give me 1 sec. So, wrong screen. Okay. I've took over in the last sprint a couple of bugs, and actually it was almost all about bugs. The first one was actually discovered by, I think it was Christian, where it was a kind of security hole in the webhook service, where it was easy to just use this add notation in the curl payload to actually upload files from the webhook service. For example, this is a very simple example I took over from Christian, where we just configure a webhook with a post request method to this URL there, and all you needed to do is just to set the custom payload to, for example, @, and then a path to some local file of the webhook service, and all of a sudden you had uploaded with a post request the content of this file. The fix was, of course, to disallow the usage of this @ inside the data block of the curl command. I've done this as far as it's possible. There are other ways to tell curl to use a local file. These were already disallowed, for example, the -f flag and so on. And in this screenshot, you see, for example, that this particular example where you try to upload the etc host file did fail. You also see the error message here in the uniform screen, where it just said, okay, could not execute this webhook because @ in data block is not allowed. Basically, it was all about enhancing the current parsing we have in place. Of course, I also took care of that you could use the @ on places where it's absolutely allowed. For example, I don't know, email addresses in a regular payload or something like that. That was the first one. The second one was also for the webhook service, kind of similar, where it was it also Christian? I don't know, who discovered that one. It was just possible to use URLs which are kind of which refers to the Kubernetes cluster the webhook service is running on. For example, in this screenshot, you see here that we are configuring a webhook call, request method get, doesn't matter, to this URL here. And this is already a more, not tricky, but a situation which could also just happen. For example, if you just put a / before each of the characters of the URL, curl will also happily just take this and make a request to the URL kubernetes.default.service. So also in this fix here, I've tried to do as much as can possibly be done to do the right parsing to disallow URLs. So we have, I think, somewhere already. So I think this was actually already in place, where we disallow local Kubernetes local domain names, for example, Kubernetes default, blah, 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 localhost, and so on. And in this fix, I've just enhanced also the parsing This also covers the case where between each of the characters there's a backslash and so on. So I've tried to make this as much bulletproof as this like it's possible. And in the end, you also see here, also in this example, again, this will not work with the current version because it will say, okay, kernel command contains invalid URL Kubernetes in this, and I think this goes on here in this example. Note that we really need to improve, sorry Christian, we really need to improve parsing though, because now we don't make this distinction between URL options and payload. So one thing which is really not nice is that these names here, Kubernetes.default and so on, are actually also not allowed in a regular payload right now. We need to fix that in a follow-up issue where we really need to somehow actually rework the whole parsing of the commands. Christian, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add, could you change the PR title to say block list or deny list? Like if you work on improvements there, I'm not sure if it's a use case for many people, but maybe there is a use case where people want to add their own URLs or hosts that they don't allow accessing, but not sure if that's an actual use case. So just
we already have a ticket for that in the backlog, Christian.
Yeah, in the end, two, I would say, quite big security holes are now staffed.
Sorry if I interject here again. Also in the code, I see it could be called block list or deny list, maybe.
Yeah. How is it called right now?
It's called blacklist.
Blacklist.
Should not use that term anymore.
Yeah.
Are we using blacklist or deny list? I'm good with either one, just curious.
Block list and deny list both work fine.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Blacklist is maybe not a good term. So
yeah, it's not an engineering problem, to be honest.
Yeah, but could be misleading. Could be misleading. You're absolutely right. Good. Those were those two things about the webhook service. Let's go to the next one. Resource service. There was a ticket, which was kind of a bit weird, but in the end, the focus of this ticket shifted a little bit. In the end, I've updated the description of this, what has been done for the resource service. The first thing I've done is previously there was a proof of concept implementation where we just introduced retry logic, for example, when the resource service is handling a resource deletion and it failed, then there was introduced a resource logic. And one original goal of this ticket was to introduce this also to all other places that make sense. This I just did. The second one was that a couple of weeks or days, no, actually weeks ago, the resource service was prepared to run in a multi-replica fashion, so multiple resource services in parallel. And there was a preparation done that certain things should not be handled via API calls because they are load balanced, but via regular NUTS events. In particular, this was the project delete finished event. So we are actually firing from shiplet controller, and we were modifying or adding NUTS capabilities to the resource service. So this one is actually connected to the NUTS broker and would get this event when a project is deleted. And each of the replicas will then clean up its local file system for this particular event and not a single one. So we don't need to synchronize between each replicas, but each of the replicas get the event. So that was a preparation for having resource service with multiple replicas. although it's still shipped and will be shipped for the near future with just one replica. Depends a little bit what you want to achieve. It's probably enough with one replica to support zero downtime scenarios. Later on, when we fully support HA, high availability, we might think of really running it with multiple replicas. Nonetheless, this is now in place, but had a problem because we switched from regular NUTs to Jetstream. This is also in place in the shipyard controller. So Jetstream, if you don't know, it's just running NUTs with a persistent event store in the back so that you don't lose events. Important for certain scenarios which will come in the future, also availability and zero downtime. But there was a conflict between resource service and shipyard controller, Shippy, when setting up those streams. So basically, resource service did that, shipyard controller did that, and it was just a conflicting setting in a stream from a high-level point of view. I've changed this in the code of the resource service, where I've discovered then that there is really no need for the resource service to use Jetstream at all. So even though you are using Jetstream, you're not forced to use the features of Jetstream. So I've changed back basically the NUTs package. I've deleted everything we had here. It was anyway just a copy of what we had in the shipyard controller, and created the small little package, which is just called NUTs subscriber, where you can just subscribe like you would normally do to an event on a NUTs broker. In particular, you just call subscriber, connect from env, you have the subscriber, and subscribe, in this case, to an event, project delete finished event. So this one will just now use again the regular subscribe mechanism of NUTs and not Jetstream. This fixed the problems, and this was then also included in this PR. What else did we have here? I think that already was it. Could think of putting or evolving this package into a separate library so that we don't use separate kind of duplicated or code which does the same things in now I think 3 places: resource service, distributor, and shipyard controller. We should use a single module, with a nice interface for that in the future. And there was not more to that. We did more in this ticket, but we reverted whole parts of it because we realized that it's actually not needed. And that's what's left. Okay, that was a long talk for this one. I have still yet another one. Currently, the distributor, when it is running, it is sending these heartbeats to the Keptn control plane, where it just receives then the current subscription for itself and can react if subscriptions have been changed on the control plane or in the bridge actually. And problem here was if, for example, this does when a distributor is running, aka when a service is running with a distributor, and you change, for example, the API token or you lose connection, then this distributor and also the service will silently just continue to run. You could take a look at the logs where you then would see, okay, there's a problem with sending heartbeats, but from the outside, everything is fine. Nothing seems to be broken. You don't immediately see that there's a problem with this distributor. It cannot actually reach the control plane and does nothing. Not so good. So this one isn't totally finished. I need to do some cleanup, but basically it's done. So I presented already today. And for example, I have here prepared some little demo. What you can now do, you can specify additional environment variables, which are defaulting to, I think, for this 1 to 10 or 5, I don't know now. But you can, for example, set the maximum amount or number of registration retries. Registration means you start a distributor, it will try to register itself to the control plane, and this could be configured now to be retried, for example, here 3 times. If it doesn't work, distributor will exit. Maximum number of heartbeat retries, that's when you're having a distributor already running. You change all of the sudden on the control plane the API token, for example, could also have other reasons. Then after this amount of time, also the shipyard, the distributor will exit with an error message. Let's try it. I will just start the distributor right now. On my cluster, I have scaled down right now the API service, so it could not connect at all to the control plane. You see it will try it 3 times. After the 3rd one, it will then give up and exit that. What I will do now, I will scale up the API service. Just give me 1 sec. Takes a bit. Yeah, it's already running. So no problem there. API service on the Keptn control plane is running. It's able to connect to the HTTP endpoint, polling events. It's happy. Now we'll just scale down again this API service on the control plane. And it should start complaining that something is not okay, like it did before. But actually, after this, after the 3rd time, retrying to send its heartbeat to the control plane, it should then in the end give up. And what's also nice, it doesn't just do a fatal exit, a forced exit, so to say, but it also will gracefully shut down. So there's no real need for that right now, but it's prepared to do whatever it's necessary to gracefully shut down. For example, you see here, 3rd time it didn't work. It will terminate the uniform logger. It will terminate the event forwarder and the HTTP poller. So this happens in a graceful manner and not just OS exit and that. Yeah, as I said, still need to clean up this, and I will file the pull request today. There will be some additional environment variables, as I already said. These 3 max heartbeat retries defaults to 5, max registration retries 5, heartbeat interval duration 10. So that's the interval in seconds or minutes, whatever you put here between those retries. Good. I think that's for me. And if you have a question, yeah.
What does the status code 500 mean? So is this a 500 from distributor, or do you get this back from the API?
I would say you get this back from the API.
Okay.
But if the service is down, how can you get a 500?
Good question. So there's now no code in the distributor in place for that, I think. Not that I know.
Yeah, it comes from the gateway or from the service.
Yeah.
I would expect something like a gateway timeout or some, but 500 really means internal server error. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit general, I would say. But we have that in other places as well. Maybe I'll also note that down. We will need to look at that.
Okay.
But it's now not related to distributor at all, so it just prints out what it gets. Okay. there no other question, I wish to stop my sharing. Hand over to
me.
And me is Anna. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So can you see my screen properly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not many fancy things from my side. The first thing is we had a few troubles with GitHub in these days. So we decided to enable the possibility for the user to have a create project or an update project comment without specifying the user. This is because, especially on Windows clients, when was it, like a couple of days ago or a week ago, it was possible for these comments to work without, but with the user we had some trouble. So now both of them can be specified, but are not mandatory. Then another thing I worked on was reducing the dependencies we had in the integration test. So basically, before we were using many models that were stored in the shipyard. And this was not very nice, because then we had a little hack in the Go mode where things were looking very ugly. And the fix was everywhere in the Shippy to move these models to the Go utils, and then change the handlers Swagger files so that we can reproduce the docs in a way that we don't need to copy these models everywhere. Nothing hard. Now you have a bunch of new models shared in Go utils, and the shipyard is cleaned up of them. And then finally, the struggle of this week for me was our integration test failing. Bernd has explained already why it was failing for the research service, not subscription. I've managed also to fix a few things for the backup restore test. We were not properly testing the service after it came back up. It was using exactly the same deployment, so we were not really noticing if or not a new deployment was starting. And we also had a few trouble with an old NAT server name to be cleaned up. And yeah, removing some parts that from the research service perspective didn't really make sense. Yeah, I think that's it. If there are any questions, otherwise I will stop sharing. And I guess next would be Ermin.
Thanks. We have some technicians here repairing some desks, so sorry for the background noise. Yeah, I'm going to present some pull requests that I made for the Keptn bridge, starting with allowing to configure the send started flag for webhook configuration. So the request here was, yeah, that in the webhook YAML, similar to the send finished, you can now also configure the send started flag, which leads to either the webhook service send the started event by the send the started event, or don't send it. So your integration then has to take care of that. And yeah, this was now added also to the Keptn's bridge, so that when you configure a webhook for in the bridge, you can configure the send started and the send finished event. So both of those flags are now configurable via the UI as well. Yeah, and the other two pull requests are bug fixes. First of all, a CSS fix for the dashboard. Since this text here might get longer, the tiles for projects ended having different sizes, and yeah, with my pull request, we allow the text to break. So the tiles are the same size and split across the screen nicely. And one more is when starting the Keptn's bridge, we load some metadata, and especially when you activate the version check feature, then we also load version JSON from get.keptn.sh, and if that was not available or couldn't, if get Keptn.sh is not up and running, for example, then yeah, the dashboard or the projects were not loaded. And yeah, this is now fixed, that even if this version JSON is not available, we still show the projects, but for that case, the version check will not work and is yeah, disabled. So that's all from my side. And handing back to Oleg.
Evan, can you bring back your screen? Just because one question regarding the first pull request.
Sure.
Because the behavior is, what's the situation when I now subscribe to a started or finished event? Will then be these radio buttons be disabled?
Yeah, the send started, so the flags are then not set, and these radio buttons are disabled, as we had with the finished event as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a bridge running at the moment to show it, but we had it with the finished flag already. We had the same behavior, so only for subscribing to triggered events, we sent the started and the finished event from the webhook service, and subscribing to started or finished events will never send started or finished events.
Perfect. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks all for the demos. Am I audible? No. So if there is no more items for the agenda, I think we can just proceed with whatever Q&A. So we have quite a lot of people on the call. Maybe there are some questions about JSOC or other related things. And yeah, if there are no questions, we can quickly close down. But so if you want to ask something, just unmute yourself and we can discuss these topics. Okay. So while we're there, don't hesitate to provide any feedback about contributing experience in the chat. So we have help contributing, etc. Because we are working on improving contributing guidelines and other materials. So if you see any obstacles as a newcomer developer and contributor, just bring them up so we can see how we can improve the documentation and overall experience. And if there are no questions, we can just close down the meeting. So thanks, everyone. So the next meeting will take place next week, 9 a.m. UTC as usual. So if anyone is interested in community topics, please join us. And I hope it will be an interesting conversation. So, thanks, everyone, for the demos. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.